There has been a significant development in the relationship between Miles Bridges and the Charlotte Hornets. Plus, LaMelo Ball gives an interview on NBA TV. Find out what he thinks about his new head coach, Steve Clifford. That's all ahead on this edition of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
This is Locked On Hornets. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Thank you for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every single day. We are free and we're daily. Did you get that? We're on every day. Wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube, where you can see our bright, shining faces. I'm Doug Branson. I'm the co-host of this show. I'm usually joined alongside me by Walker Mail, but Walker is out today. It's my fault he's out today. It's not his fault. Typically, it's his fault. I don't like to take blame a lot on this show, but this one's on me. I'll explain why in the second segment, but we've got some big updates in this first segment to get to. You can catch more of my work on my substack, Every Hornets Boxscore.com, where I talk about past Hornets box scores, but I also give you game notes on every single box score this season. You can subscribe for free, or you can support my work. Every dollar helps me continue to produce that work, so would greatly appreciate your support. There, you can follow me on Twitter at Doug Branson LOH. You can follow Walker on Twitter, by the way, at Walker Mail. Okay, big update here on Miles Bridges. It's a significant update in that it has some significance because the updates we've been getting on the felony domestic violence charges against Miles Bridges have been simply that the court date, the preliminary hearing, was continued for a fourth time. That was the last update, and that's really been the only updates. We haven't had much in the way of updates in terms of the relationship between Miles Bridges and the Charlotte Hornets, and if it has any present or future. Well, we did get an update from Shams of the Rally. I guess that's the new Shams branding. Shams on Twitter saying the Hornets and Miles Bridges have allowed his $7.9 million qualifying offer to expire, sources tell me. So the qualifying offer expired, and if you'll remember, there was a deadline previously that passed and meant that the Hornets and Miles Bridges had to mutually agree to drop that qualifying offer. Well, there was another deadline, and that deadline was October 1st, where any teams with qualifying offers to restricted free agents that qualifying offer had not been signed, they had to extend that, and they could have extended it up until March 1st, but obviously the Hornets and Miles Bridges have not chosen to do that. And I think it doesn't give us much information as to what the team feels about this situation. We don't know for sure, but we do know they have decided to not extend to extend the deadline for Miles Bridges to sign that qualifying offer. So the qualifying offer goes away. But according to the NBA's free agency primer, it doesn't mean anything in terms of Miles Bridges' restricted free agency status. He is still a member of, or still a restricted free agent, so any team offer could be matched by the Charlotte Hornets. Why do I bring all of this up? I bring all of this up to say that though this seems like a significant development, it's not really that significant in that this is not a decisive separation between the Charlotte Hornets and Miles Bridges. And this is being reported on, but it does not come accompanied with any kind of statement from the team or anyone affiliated with the team to give us more context and information as to why. All we know right now is that Miles Bridges has another court date on October 7th, a preliminary, again, this is supposed to be a preliminary hearing to decide if this is going to go to trial. And that's all we really know. And frankly, I mean, other than the restricted free agency status of Miles Bridges, there is no current relationship between the Charlotte Hornets and Miles Bridges, in that they are not contractually obligated at this time to move forward. And I guess that is the significant development, is that Miles Bridges cannot at this time sign that qualifying offer and become a member of the Charlotte Hornets for this season. The two parties could still at some future date come together and decide that they want to move forward, although I think that seems unlikely. And I think it's very unlikely that another team would decide to put in an offer at this point until or if this all resolves itself. So, for me, I've seen the pictures that were released by the victim in this case, and I've seen the video that was reported by TMZ on Instagram that has now been taken down. But I've seen those, and I can't unsee those. And I don't know that there's any resolution to this matter that doesn't involve somehow explaining that. And I don't know how you explain that. It seems unexplainable, right? I'm just saying, like, I can't get past that as a fan and as someone who reports and analyzes what happens in the NBA, and as a human being, I can't get past that. So unless whatever happens in this trial situation, if there's some dropping of charges, or if there's whatever the resolution is, unless it comes with an explanation as to what happened there, then I'm not going to be satisfied, and I don't want to have to report on Miles Bridges as a member of the Charlotte Hornets. And so we don't necessarily know where all of this is going. And it's difficult, I think, in these kind of situations where you have multiple felony domestic violence charges. You do have a victim in this case. You have multiple victims. You have his partner, and you also have his children as being victims, as reportedly they witnessed this, and the charges would reflect that there was some witnessing by the children of these acts. So you have multiple victims in this case, and I just have a difficult time getting past that, and I also have a difficult time really talking about the basketball ramifications of this. It's why sort of the media day rumblings about the whole situation made me slightly uncomfortable. Made me uncomfortable. I mean, it was uncomfortable to hear LaMelo Ball saying that he hopes that the organization keeps him. And I try to. I said on the show at the time, like, I don't really care what the players say, because they don't really first of all, they're too close to the situation. I thought Kelly Oubre probably had the smartest thing to say on the whole matter, which is, I'm too close to the situation. It's too personal. No comment. Right. These people that have played with Miles Bridges, are friends with Miles Bridges. They're not the people that really matter. It's the organization that matters. The organization can make the decision whether or not to have a future with this particular player. So those are the only people that I really care to hear from. But it was disappointing for LaMelo Ball to say he hopes that they keep him, because LaMelo might not necessarily have all the information. And I would say likely doesn't have all of the information. He's probably just as in the dark about all of this as anyone. And so I think in those situations where you don't have all of the information, we see this time and time again, where people get out in front of something and say, hey, I don't really, this is my friend and I'm going to support that person. And then the situation, evolves and becomes worse and worse. And that position becomes suddenly untenable. And so it's best just to say what Kelly Oubre said, which is, hey, this is all like too close, too personal to me, no comment. So we will see how all of this continues to develop. Again, the next court date is October 7th, and we will have more information on that if it gets continued again, or if we have some kind of news to report. We will definitely be on your feeds with that. So coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, LaMelo Ball did speak one-on-one with NBATV. The subject of Miles Bridges did not come up, but a few other subjects did. Steve Clifford, including Dennis Smith Jr., his thoughts on DSJ and on the team identity, which I found very interesting. So that's all coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast. But first, got to tell you about somebody that's been supporting this show for a long, long time. Really, I don't know that we would be doing this show, honestly, without these folks, and that's Built Bar. And they make some delicious products. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And let me tell you, I just had a baby, and so I know all about life's greatest joys. And yes, I agree. I would put Built Bar Puffs up there with having my baby. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. That's the whole thing. It's only got 160 calories and a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. They are my snack of choice when I come in for a run. I mean, I've used them as breakfast. I've used them as lunch sometimes. I mean, I'm busy covering this Hornets preseason. Sometimes I just got to grab a quick lunch. I've done it with a Built Bar. They're filling, they're good for you, and only 15 grams of protein. Here's the deal. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON15. More ahead here on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are listening to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Unless Mitch has Buzz on his lap, and Buzz is sort of
Santa style. I like it.
Oh yeah, or ventriloquist. You know.
Well, let's how much ventriloquist are we going? I don't think anything, or I don't want to go that much. Whoa, yeah, I don't want to go with ventriloquist. Let's go. I like the Santa style a little bit more. Either one is creepy.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Back here on the Locked On Hornets podcast, I'm Doug Branson. Now, no Walker Mail. Usually, maybe if you're listening to this for the first time, you don't even know I have a co-host. I actually have a host. I'm kind of the co-host. I'm the person that sits on the right. I get to spit the hot takes, and he is the radio professional that gets to serve it up for me and try to cool me down. He tries as best he can. I'm too dangerous for radio. I've got the hot takes. So, he is not here. The show is unbalanced, and it's my fault. And I don't take, if you've been listening to this show for a long time, I don't take blame very often. This is my fault. And I will tell you why it's my fault, why he's not here, and I will actually wrap that back around into the Hornets. But I'm going to do that in the next segment because I saw an interview with LaMelo Ball on NBATV. I saw it because I've been exploring this new NBA app, and this isn't an ad for the NBA app because let me just tell you right now, fair and balanced, the NBA app on the Apple TV is not very good, but they have redesigned it. And so they're putting a lot of video, like if you go to LaMelo's page, there's a lot of cool LaMelo videos. And if you go to the Hornets page, there's Hornets videos. And if you are watching a game on League Pass, which is a lot cheaper this season, by the way, I signed up, tax write-off, holler. But I signed up, and if you watch it on League Pass, you get all of these videos of highlights as the game's happening. It's super cool. Anyway, so I'm on LaMelo's page, as I'm wont to do, because, look, he's the face of the franchise. You got to keep up with him, right? And he's doing an interview on NBA TV, one-on-one. I think it was around Media Day with Taylor Rooks, and he had a few interesting comments that I want to get to. So the first thing is, well, let me just say this. LaMelo doesn't often give you a lot in these interviews. He's a little guarded. I think he's been in the spotlight for a long time. And so for whatever reason, he doesn't reveal a lot. But I thought this one actually was particularly revealing. LaMelo feels like he hasn't done anything until the team gets into the playoffs and starts winning. I find this interesting because LaMelo Ball is super confident. He has the right size ego for someone that's going to become an NBA superstar. But he so often understands and parrots this idea that without team success, you cannot have the appropriate level of individual success. And look, I mean, I think a lot of people who commentate on the game are going to put a championship, in order to be one of the best players of all times, you have to win championships. But you have to have playoff success just to be considered one of the better players in the league year in and year out. And so if he can't help the Charlotte Hornets do that, and if the Charlotte Hornets can't help him do that, then, he's not going to have the individual success that he so wants. I mean, it's clear he wants to be one of the best players in the NBA. So he understands that getting this team to the playoffs, not the play-in, not even winning a play-in, but getting into the playoffs and actually having success. And that's why I think it's so difficult watching this season and understanding where they were. And I get it. There's some bad luck involved on the Hornets' part. But watching them go through this offseason and not really do anything of significance to improve this roster despite changing coaches. Changing coaches is an indication that something wasn't right the previous season, but the organization doesn't go the next step and say, all right, we're going to hire a new coach, but also move this franchise in the direction that we think that we need to be in. And so LaMelo understands getting to the playoffs, winning in the playoffs, getting on national TV. Like, that's how you raise your profile in the NBA. He did speak on Clifford as well. Taylor asked him about the new coach. He said, Cliff, I already love the dude. Straight to the point, tells you how it is. Can't get mad at that. All respect. Love to hear it. Love to hear that it's gotten off on the right foot. And I don't want to take that for granted, because it's easy to come in here and say, hey, it's easy to say that at the beginning of the season, right? And what happens when, stuff goes wrong? Okay, that's fine. It can go wrong at a later date. Playing time, shots, agents getting in your ear, there's all kinds of things. And by the way, Steve Clifford recognizes that. He's trying to do this thing in terms of developing relationships with all the players on the team, but also the best players on the team. It seems like he's trying to do this the right way. But even he recognized in one of these training camp scrums, he mentioned, okay, it's really easy to be fun and have a good time before the season, but what happens when you go on a 3-game losing streak? What happens when you're not getting enough shots, or you don't feel like your role is correct in the offense? So obviously, yes, those things can be a problem. But I think we shouldn't take for granted the idea that so often these situations get off on the wrong foot immediately and become unrecoverable. You have to have a great first impression. It doesn't guarantee that the relationship continues to be good. But at least you have to get that great first impression. And it seems like, Clifford, and this is what we've always talked about with Steve Clifford, he understands what wins in the NBA. I don't think he's necessarily been given the tools. You can understand, okay, I know how to win in the NBA. But if you're not given the right ingredients, you can't make a great meal. I mean, that's just bottom line. If you're dealing with bad ingredients, it's going to, even if you're a properly trained chef, you might be able to raise the level of those ingredients somewhat. But ultimately, somebody with maybe even half the knowledge and twice the ingredients is probably going to make a better meal. But it's good to know that straightforward Clifford telling him, hey, look, I've studied your game. Here are some things that I'm seeing. I know it wins in the NBA. If we do these things, we can get you what you want. That kind of approach seems to be working with LaMelo Ball, and that's very good to know. Also mentioned Dennis Smith Jr., who is we didn't see him until late in that first preseason game. I wonder how much of that is getting into basketball shape. Dennis Smith Jr. has been injured the past couple of seasons. Maybe there is a little bit of being careful, just like they were careful with Cody Martin, holding him out. They were careful with Gordon Hayward, holding him out of that first preseason game. So how much of that is going on with Dennis Smith Jr. playing late? Will he be the backup point guard? We don't know. I mean, it's an unguaranteed deal. He could go away and they could look at another option, bring in another option at backup point guard. We just simply don't know at this point. But we do know that LaMelo Ball has some familiarity with Dennis Smith Jr., so that probably helps DSJ's case. He said that he knows him from camps that DSJ was in with his brother. So LaMelo Ball has some familiarity, probably some friendship with DSJ, and you want that. You want that in your, because A, you're probably going to play them together at some point, but I think there has to be some trust level there. For a star player to go on the bench, I think they have to have some understanding. This is what made the whole Kemba, Jeremy Lin thing work, is that you were relying a ton on Kemba Walker. But Kemba Walker had to believe when he went to the bench that the team was going to be okay. And the team was more than okay when Jeremy Lin was on the floor, and you were able to play those two side by side and get some real advantages there because of the size difference between Lin and Kemba Walker and some of the things they did. It was electric at times. Can they recreate that with LaMelo Ball and DSJ? Is DSJ in shape? Is he ready to go? He was making it. I mean, made a few shots. I think he scored 8 points in that game with some efficiency. He took a lot of shots, getting those opportunities, seemed to be able to create some looks in the mid-range. We didn't see any outside shots from DSJ, and honestly, that's probably okay. When we talked about DSJ being added to the team, we mentioned that his three-point shooting has been pretty much bad his entire career, has been somewhat erratic, but generally not very good. So you probably don't want DSJ. You want him driving, hopefully finishing a little bit better than he's done in previous seasons, or maybe working on some stuff in the mid-range. And finally, LaMelo Ball was asked about what this team's identity is. And that's a big question, one that I think, Steve Clifford is very focused on, is developing an identity for this team, because I think the identity for the past couple of seasons has been extremely fun to watch, high-octane offense, but those two things have not equaled winning, right? I mean, they won, but they didn't win the play-in. They didn't get into the playoffs. It hasn't equaled playoff success. So what is the team identity going to be that actually gets them back to the playoffs for the first time since 2016? And LaMelo's answer was, try to be a dog team. Get all the loose balls. Try to be a dog team. I don't know that we saw a dog team against the Celtics in that first preseason game. So that's something that they're going to be probably continuing to work on as they get used to playing without Miles Bridges. They get used to playing within Clifford's scheme. It's game one of the preseason. Not going to overreact too far on there, although I really want to. I really just want to go out and overreact on all of the players. It's part of my nature, but I'm going to try, given the circumstances, I'm going to try to give some benefit of the doubt. But I think against Indiana, you got to show a little bit more of that dog. I didn't see a lot of that dog. I saw them getting sped up. I mean, maybe a dog team can mean a lot of different things. I think what he's trying to insinuate there is obviously a team that is aggressive. That kind of breed of dog that's going to protect the house. There are certain breeds of dog that you really associate with that: pit bulls, German shepherds. But I think the team that I saw against the Celtics, they were sped up. They were looking disorganized, sped up. So they were looking a little, I would say maybe Chihuahua. So you can be all kinds of a dog team. What kind of dog team do they want to be? I think that's what they have to establish in the rest of this preseason heading into the regular season. Because look, the fact is they've got some deficiencies, and some of those deficiencies are built in. And some of those deficiencies, like the center position, have been built in for many, many years. Going back to Clifford's time here, the first time he was here, they've had deficiencies. Clifford has been looking for a rim-protecting center, an anchor underneath in Charlotte for a very long time, and this organization has not been able to deliver. And after preseason game one of watching Mark Williams, I'm a little worried that they will have to be waiting a lot longer. I thought maybe they had found an answer that was going to be a little bit more immediate, and maybe they have. Maybe it's a one-game sample, and so maybe we shouldn't overreact. Or maybe we should overreact and say, hey, first-round pick, 15th overall, maybe there's a little bit more expected in a first preseason game. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to, in fact, this goes into the next segment, second looks. I've dived into the tape. We don't typically, once the season gets started, oh boy, it takes off, and we don't have a lot of time to really go back and dive in, but I did, and so I gave some second looks, and I'll talk about what I saw in that first preseason game. So that's coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast, but first, Got to tell you about LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. I own a small business. I know. I've hired contractors before. It's scary. You don't know if you're getting somebody that knows what they're doing or doesn't know what they're doing. It's difficult. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates using simple tools. That's the thing. You don't want this whole process to be like super complicated. It scares people away, right? Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. It's all about speed, baby. Speed. Time is money, right? All right. This is how you do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, back to that preseason game 1. We've got another preseason game coming up. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, so you want to tune in for that show previewing that game against Indiana. But first, we got to still look at some of these things that we saw in that first preseason game because a lot of players played. I mean, they played 15 guys, it felt like. So we have to take a look at some of these little things. We will do that coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Looking at this first preseason game, again, 134-93 was the final score. Blowout city. But I wanted to take a deeper look into some of the things that happened in that game, and I think there's some questions. Was the offense really that bad? And I want to go back to something that Steve Clifford mentioned in some of these media sessions before heading into this game against Boston. And he said he really liked two things that he saw from the Charlotte Hornets because he's been very careful to say, the details, the offensive details especially, but some of the defensive details too have not been fully installed, right? This team is in beta a little bit. It's not in alpha. It's not ready to go yet. So it was probably always going to be messy in every universe. If you ran that game, maybe it doesn't become a 41-point blowout. Maybe they shoot the basketball a little bit better, but they probably get beaten by double digits if you run that simulation 100 times. But there were two things that Steve Clifford said he did like that he saw out of the team heading into that game. And number one was physicality on the boards, which is something he is extremely focused on. He loves seeing that. And he also loved to see the ball movement. And so I thought it would be interesting to kind of examine these stats and see if those two things held true. Because you could do both of those things and still lose a basketball game, right? Sometimes the shooting isn't there. Sometimes you can lose by 40 simply by virtue of players being in the season, being gassed, being tired legs. And there may be a little bit of that involved with this game as well, because you have to remember they've been scrimmaging a lot. And I think that's a higher energy, higher intensity kind of thing than than if you're just running like all standing around trying to learn offense and different defensive stuff or doing drills. I mean, I think scrimmaging is more high intensity, high energy than that. So there could be a little bit of that. Terry Rozier certainly looked tired. There could be a little bit of rust. P.J. Washington mentioned that after the game that, he thinks everyone's rusty. Okay, well, I hope they shake the rust off soon because I don't think they can sustain another 41-point blowout against Indiana without some people starting to panic a little bit. But okay, so let's take a look at those two things. Physicality on the boards, did we see that? And ball movement, did we see that? Well, I'm going to start with ball movement and say we did not see that. There was a lot of selfish offense on the floor. It was happening across the board. I thought, when they tried to execute some offense, it worked for the most part, especially that first team offense. I mean, they were holding serve with the Boston Celtics, who were turning the basketball over a lot, giving the Hornets extra opportunities to execute that offense. They were doing it. They just weren't knocking down shots. But they weren't, I would say, like, especially once they got into the groove of the game and started to get down, they weren't when they got into the Jazz part of the offense, when it started to become improvisational and they weren't running as many set plays, the offense really got caught in the mud and they weren't moving the basketball effectively. And they lost the assist battle in this game. I want you to get ready for this. I want you to prepare yourself for this. I don't want you to fall off the treadmill when I tell you this number. I don't want you to be in some kind of accident when I tell you this number, because this disparity in assists was alarming. They lost the assist battle 41-13 to the Boston Celtics. Boston had 41 assists. That's incredible. But even more incredible is a Charlotte Hornets team that was one of the top teams in the league at moving the basketball only had 13 assists in this game. There was a lot of forcing of the offense. There was a lot of one-on-one offense, trying to take it to the hole and being unsuccessful at doing that. There was a lot of pull-up jumpers that probably shouldn't have been pull-up jumpers. And the problem is when you don't move the basketball and you do take those ill-advised pull-up jumpers, those tend to turn into transition offense for the other team. Well, this team wasn't good at defending transition last season, and they weren't good at defending transition in this game. That's where they got beat up. Clifford recognized that after the game, said, the cutters were running free, and people like to think of like transition defense sometimes as fast break. And what were let's see if I can pull up the fast breaks. So the fast break points in this game, 15-9 in favor of the Boston Celtics. Not a deciding factor. That's 6 points. They got beat by 41. A lot of people think of transition D as like, oh, the other team fast break, easy bucket on the other end. I think if you ask Steve Clifford, he would say, no, transition defense is any time you are not able to get into your set defense and start to defend that way. And that's what Boston was able to do to this team. They were able to up the pace, makes and misses. This is what Steve Clifford wants the Hornets offensively to do to other teams, is force you to play transition defense, not set defense, force you to play quickly regardless of whether you make it or miss it on your end of the floor. And that's exactly what Boston executed on. And so you had times when there may have been 3, even 4 players back ready to get into the set defense, but 1 or 2 players lagging behind. And Boston recognized it immediately and started to move the basketball around. And that gets your defense at that point into scramble mode, and you're making decisions on the fly. You're getting sped up. Oh, boy. And the Hornets were sped up in this game. Let me tell you, from offense and defense, everything seemed to be moving too quickly. LaMelo made some ill-advised, especially when he got into those minutes with the bench, he was making some ill-advised passes. The alley-oop pass to JT Thor that didn't go anywhere. Well, it went somewhere. It went into the transition offense for the Boston Celtics. They were sped up, and I know all about being sped up. And when you're sped up, you make critical errors. And that brings me, finally, I've been teasing it all show, but this is why Walker Mail isn't in the house, because he's on WFNZ right now as I'm recording. And so we were supposed to record yesterday afternoon for this show. And I was all ready to record, and I was having a refrigerator delivered to my house, and they couldn't turn the water off. And so I'm in scramble mode. I'm trying to figure out how to get the water turned off. I'm not, look, I'll tell you, I'm a city boy. I am not someone that really understands a lot about some of these processes, and I live in the city. And when you're in the city, it's a little bit more complicated in terms of turning the water off. It's stuff. It's owned by the city. You want to be careful about messing with anything like that. And, I messed someone else's water up so I live in this sort of cluster of homes, and in the cluster, the water shutoffs are all close together. And so the people who were delivering the fridge were like, hey, we got to go. So I'm getting sped up. I'm scrambling. I'm trying to figure out how to get this water turned off. And I messed somebody else's water up. Now everything's fine. We got the water back on. It's all good. Props to the city of Nashville. They were great. But I was so stressed out by the afternoon. I was in like super stress mode. And I just could not even get my brain into Hornets mode. And so I told Walker, all right, I'll do the show solo on Monday. All that to say that when you get sped up, you make critical errors. You turn the basketball over. You don't get good shots. And when you don't get good shots and you miss badly, and we saw some bad misses from LaMelo. We saw some bad misses from Terry. We saw a few bad misses from P.J. Washington, who was 1 of 7 in this game. We said he was quiet. He wasn't really quiet. He just wasn't good offensively. And when those bad misses go to a team that just came back from the finals and didn't lose a lot of pieces, in fact, are adding pieces. They've added Blake Griffin, which I don't know if that's great or not, by the way. I mean, Blake Griffin was on the Nets. Blake Griffin might be a bad luck charm. We don't know. But it might be a little like sort of Ewing theory in reverse. You get Blake Griffin and things start to go wrong. We just don't know that yet. We don't know. But they're adding pieces. They're a good team. And when you give the good teams opportunities on those bad misses, when you're not moving the basketball and getting effective paint touches, which they weren't, I don't think that I don't see the points in the paint battle went. That's interesting. The Hornets actually won the paint battle 48 to 46, but I don't think on a lot of those 3-point opportunities the ball was touching the paint and coming back out. So all that to say, the Hornets have to try to slow things down. And I think to slow things down, you probably have to be a little bit more sure about what's going on. That's what I should have done in my situation. I should have stepped back and said, all right, what are my options here? I need to slow things down a little bit, be a little bit more patient, understand that I control the speed of this situation. And then that's how you make good decisions. That's how you make rational decisions. You cannot make rational decisions when you are being sped up by outside forces. So that's what the Hornets have to do in this next game against Indiana. They have to slow things down. And you slow things down when you're a little bit more sure, when you're a little bit more confident in what's being called from the sideline, and you're more confident with some of the playing groups that you're going to be in. As much as we've been frustrated, and I'm speaking for the fans here, as much as we've been frustrated by the Gordon Hayward experience, and we look at the dollar amount, and we look at the number of games played, and we look at the contributions, as much as we malign what's gone on there, I don't think it's a question. I think if you're questioning it, you're probably just biased, and you look at the money and you're upset, and you say, this guy's a joke, this guy's a bozo, and he doesn't really affect things on the floor. But if you're objective about it, I think you can say, like, Gordon Hayward can score on all three levels and can pass, and he's somebody that you can deliver the ball to and know it's probably going to the right spot, and it's somebody that can help organize your offense. LaMelo is the organizer of the offense, but having players on the floor that you can effectively go to and can bail you out. When you are sped up, it's great to have somebody that you can throw the basketball to and bail you out. Jalen McDaniels was trying to do that. He was trying to play that role. He was playing the role of, all right, I'm going to go hit a tough shot here one-on-one. He was one of the few effective players going one-on-one was Jalen McDaniels. So hopefully they can get Gordon Hayward back out in this second preseason game against Indiana. Hopefully they get Cody Martin. That's obviously going to improve their defense. We'll see. We're going to preview that game on tomorrow's show. So make sure you're tuned in every single day to the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with the Locked On NBA podcast. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Thank you so much for hanging with me for 30-plus minutes. I'm Doug Branson. Make sure you check out my work on everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm back with Walker Mail tomorrow. Until then, I'm going to say go Hornets, go America, let's swarm Charlotte.